ever stumbled across a figure skating video and you're like, wow, that looks freaking sick, how do I do that as well? And just wondered, how much would it actually cost to start figure skating? So today you're gonna find out the cold hard truth, no pun intended. Hello friends of the internet. If you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. My name is Kathy and I'm a 25-year-old competitive figure skater living in New York, and I also work a good old boring day job as a management consultant. If you also want to see more real-time skating content and updates, you can also find me on Instagram here down in the corner below. Let's talk figure skating accessibility. As much as I love so many aspects of this sport, the one downside of it all, it is definitely by far not the most accessible sport to all. That is really unfortunate because in my opinion, sports are part of the joy, the thrill, and the beauty of just moving and being alive. Everyone should have the opportunity and fortune to be able to experience that at some point in their lives. There is a collective effort needed to help lower some of those barriers to entry and make the sport more accessible to all. So the first part is going to be a real breakdown of all of my figure skating expenses by category, and the second section is more about how to budget for figure skating and tips and tricks of how to save money. My goal is to really share from my personal experience from when I started skating from scratch as a completely broke college student working 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet, and how I still was able to start figure skating. And my ultimate hope for this video is to try to make figure skating a more accessible sport through sharing information. In addition, I developed a free figure skating budget tracker so you guys can track your figure skating expenses by category in a much easier way. So I'll link that in the description down below so you can download my tracker for free. Before we jump into our little accounting 101 section, please give that beautiful subscribe button down below some love. It will literally take you 1 second and it will mean the absolute world to me. And plus, I will love you forever if that counts as anything. Probably not, because you guys probably don't rely on me for validation, and more like it's the other way around. Okay, part 1, the expense breakdown. 3 things to start and preface the conversation with. 1, you guys will see the numbers and 100% get sticker shock. And I promise the numbers will add up faster than you can rotate a triple axle. But that is okay, because in part 2, we'll talk about how to reduce those costs. Second, do keep in mind that everyone's finances are different. If you live in different cities, that might also affect how much the cost is. I'm gonna do my best to give you guys some ranges, but do keep in mind that I live in New York City, and New York City is an expensive little bit where everything, including rent, food, just living, existing, breathing the disgusting piss-smelling subway air will cost you a lot of freaking money. And number 3, yes, I am self-sustained. Every expense I mentioned in this video is covered from my own savings and earnings. So let's dive into the expenses. I'm going to categorize the types of figure skating expenses into 3 categories. So the first one is recurring expenses, the second one is initial investment, and the third one is competition-related expenses. Competition expenses may not apply to you. However, if you do plan on competing to some degree, whether it's today or tomorrow, that section might still be relevant to you. So within recurring expenses, I think the most amount of money that I do spend is on ice time itself. In New York City, a freestyle session will typically cost you around $20 to $30 per sessions, and typically the sessions are 50 minutes long. If you live in another city, that might be less expensive. When I skate in California, a freestyle session is typically actually a little bit longer at 60 minutes per session, and the rates are actually around $12 to $15. If we want to skate 4 days per week, 2 sessions each time, that will land you at around $200 for ice time alone in a week. The second biggest category of recurring expenses would be coaching. So typically from my experience, if you want to go the private lesson route, coaches typically charge $50 to $60 per 25 to 30 minutes. So that's usually half of the session. Coaching is something that I've seen pretty standard across the board. Even in California, it's also around the $50 to $60 range. If you're just starting off, 1 lesson per week will more than suffice, but if you're taking this really competitively, really seriously, you might be working with different coaches for certain different elements. If you're working with a coach 3 times a week, and each time it is half of a session, average rate for coaching is $55 multiplied by 3 times a week. That will land us at $165 per week for coaching alone. And the next section is off-ice training. Invest in things like Pilates classes, ballet classes, flexibility and strength, or yoga classes. Typically those run about $20 to $25 a piece. I probably do 2 off-ice training classes every week, so that will be 20 times 2, which sets you back $40 for off-ice training. So the last recurring cost is the cost of maintaining your equipment regularly. The blade part of your boot needs to be sharpened regularly depending on how often you skate. I skate pretty much almost every week. Once every month, I would have to pay around $20 to $40 at a time depending on what city I'm in. Then moving on to category number 2, initial investments. If you are just foraying into your new journey of starting to figure skate, you will have to make some initial investments on equipment. So that means your boot and your blade. So I mentioned this in my ultimate beginner's guide to figure skating video as well, so feel free to check that out. I'll link it in the description down below. You can start with a beginner boot. Typically that is a figure skate that is kind of just pre-made. It has the boot and the blade already attached, just comes delivered to you like that, and boom, you have a pair of figure skates to start skating. And I would say those run on average around $150 for really beginner pairs, and you can probably find them on Amazon. However, as you level up, you start learning new skills, wanting to take this more seriously, be even competitive, then you might need to get custom boots. Skating equipment is something really tricky. If you do go the custom route, you will typically have a boot and a blade. Boot part of the figure skate runs anywhere from $150 to $1,000. I know that is one hell of a range. If it's helpful to provide context, mine are the Adea Ice Flies and they're around $700. And the second part of the equation would be the blades themselves. So this sharp part right here. I have the John Wilson Gold Seal Revolution blades and they're around $700. Blades also run from on average $150 to up to $1,000 depending on what you're trying to do. So moving on to our third category, competition related costs. I'm going to speak about this in terms of the rules and regulations for the USFSA, which is the governing body for figure skating within the United States, because I am a USA figure skater. If you are international skaters, you might have to do a little bit more research into what your country does. It might be something similar but slightly different than what I'm about to go over. In order to compete in the US, you need two things. You need a USFSA membership and you also need a club membership of some sort. When you go and compete, you represent a club or you can represent yourself as an individual, but regardless, you do have to pay a membership fee. Typically, when you buy an annual membership for a club in your local city, they have options that says, hey, this also includes your USFSA membership. Usually that is the cheapest option, so that's what I personally do. I represent the Skating Club of New York because I live and exist in New York City, and every year I pay about $115 to be registered as a member, and it's only if you are registered as a member can you do things like compete and test. Testing is the foundation of how you start getting into competition. At competitions, there are multiple levels. In order to qualify to compete in certain levels, you do need to take tests that is governed by the USFSA. I know a lot of this is super confusing, but if you want more details on that, I'll be making more detailed videos about how to get into competing as a figure skater coming soon. Competition entry fees. From my experience, competitions range anywhere from $150 to $200 per event. I think some of the larger competitions like US sectionals and US nationals are $200 and some local ones are more in the $150 range. Then you also have to tag on the travel and food associated with going to competitions. Most of the time, if you're attending bigger competitions, they will not be in your home city. Depending on where the location is, you might need a car or you might need to book a flight, you might need to book a hotel. On average, a single competition, you incur $500 in travel and food expenses. So typically for me, I compete at 3 competitions per season, usually one pre-sectional competition that is more local, and then I have sectionals, and then I have nationals. My registration fee would be $200 times 3, which is around $600 in registration fees. If I were to take the $500 of travel and meals expense costs, that would be 500 times 3 of $1,500 per year. And because figure skating is a goddamn sparkly sport, yes, there will also be a costume element if you want to compete. Typically, costumes can range anywhere from $50 all the way to upwards of $2,000 and more. And then if you compete, you also have to skate to a routine that has music that would need to choreographically make sense. So most people do hire a choreographer to help them put put together a program. Let's say you need 10 sessions to finish a program. Typically, one full session with a choreographer is $120. You get $1,200 to get a program choreographed. The last category would be testing. Typically, a single test costs around $80. For every single level, there is a freestyle test and a moves in the fields test. If you count that you have to take 2 tests, then $80 times 2 would be $160 per level. You do not need to test if you just want to learn skating for the sake of learning skating. And also there are certain competitions that do offer levels that don't require you to test anything at all. So now we enter part 2. How the hell am I going to afford all of this? I know everything that I just told you in part 1, you're like, I am never going to become a figure skater. Let me tell you, there are ways to make it work, at least to some extent. I want to offer tips that would at least help some people be able to enjoy and experience the beauty of the sport. Starting off with ice time, finding practice time is key if you're trying to learn something new for obvious reasons. And what the sessions I mentioned before in my first section, those are called freestyle sessions for figure skaters. Typically, there's a little bit more space. People are more aware of where they're going. However, if you're just starting off and you're a beginner, public sessions are not a bad idea. Typically speaking, they're way less expensive. You get more ice time for less money. Public sessions I've seen can be as low as $10 all the way up to maybe $20 if you're in New York. You get at least like an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time of skating time, which is fantastic. When you start off as a beginner, you need a lot less space to learn something. When I started off learning as a beginner, you were learning things from a standstill, things that you can practice in a little corner somewhere that don't require that much movement. And here is the ultimate hack. If you can get yourself and learn skating to a baseline okay level, you can be certified to teach Learn to Skate at a rink. I enrolled in a Learn to Skate program to be a coach. So you basically just coach like really little kids, like really simple stuff like how to stop, how to move forward, stuff that you would already know how to do by just learning after a year or so. And you don't need a lot of experience to coach Learn to Skate for the most part. And they're always looking for Learn to Skate coaches. A lot of rinks, if you are a coach there, offer you ice time for free. That way you save so much money and then you also get an additional revenue stream from being a skater. Let's talk how to reduce costs for coaching. Number 1, there are group lesson options if you are just starting that might be slightly cheaper than going the private lesson route. However, I would encourage you to do the math. If you do the math and realize that group lessons actually cost about the same as private lessons, I would 100% recommend the private lessons because you learn so much faster. But for the most part, group lessons are slightly less expensive than private lessons, and you can maybe start there if you are a beginner. The second hack is find a buddy, find a friend, and split a private lesson with someone else. It is still so much more intimate than a group lesson, and you get so much more out of that experience for half of the cost. Go to a coach there and say, hey, do you mind doing a 2-on-1 session for the same price? And for the most part, they'll be a-okay with that. So that is another great hack. And the third advice would be, I would encourage you to meet your community and leverage your community as a resource for learning. There is so much to be learned by your peers around you, the people you skate with, the people you make friends with, people who can literally offer you great advice for free. The beauty of learning something new is also being embraced and joining and getting involved within the community and meeting the people who hold up that community. I asked my friends who are way better at skating than I am all the time for advice. It doesn't have to be a formal lesson. The more knowledge and information that you can get from your community, the more you can use that to improve and better your own skating. With regards to off-ice training, it is definitely not necessary to start paying for Pilates lessons or ballet lessons. In today's day and age, there are so many free resources. You can pretty much look up a video on YouTube. Like even on my channel, I offer a bunch of free off-ice training workouts for figure skaters specifically. I'll link them in the description down below. Let me know if they're helpful at all. I'm more than happy to produce more of these targeted videos if they help provide as a free resource for you to be able to improve your own skating. And one of the most expensive parts is equipment. there are ways to get equipment for a lot cheaper. There's a lot of forums on Facebook. I know literally who still uses Facebook. I literally am aging myself. It is helpful because there are so many of these groups. Moms trying to sell like their kids figure skates and costumes and all this crap, that you can actually find a lot of good communities and threads that resell figure skating related needs, whether it's boots, blades, or costumes. I'll try to link some of those Facebook groups down below if you're still a boomer like me and uses Facebook. And since we just touched upon that costume piece a bit, a great hack is you can actually buy a stock dress, or just like Google like contemporary dance dress and buy a dress that is just like a plain dress with a leotard on it, or even just like a leotard. Like if you're good at sewing, you can even sew yourself a skirt on for way cheaper than you can get out there. The secret is most figure skating costumes are incredibly expensive because of the stoning work, because the stones, the sparkly crap themselves are very expensive, and also the time and effort it takes to put all the sparkly crap on the dress is also very, very expensive. A great way you can save money is buy a stock dress for like $50 off of like dancewearsolutions.com, which is the website I use, and you go and just buy some crystals off of Amazon for a couple of dollars, and then what you would do is just put them on yourselves, and you can do a little DIY thing, and that is a great way to create a figure skating costume at a very low cost. Another costume hack that a lot of people don't know about is eBay. eBay is actually really interesting. I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh my god, eBay is like the sketchiest thing of all time. And also, hello, you're dating yourself again. You are literally a boomer for still using eBay. But I swear to god, it is helpful because you can find beautiful custom made dresses that you can get made just for you for like $150. Prior to this season, every single one of my dresses I bought from like a seller from eBay. Obviously the designs weren't custom, but the sizes and the measurements they were able to customize to fit my needs. And the reason why they're so cheap is because they are made in the promised land of China. But honestly, they look great, but I will say that please use a seller that has a lot of great reviews. I would still caution you that eBay is more of a sketchy platform, that you want to do your research. For the sellers that I have used, I can certainly link them down below. Last but not least, this is something that I did a lot when I first started skating and literally had no dresses to wear, is ask to borrow from a friend. I started in college, I had teammates around me, but leverage your community. That would be a great way to save money as well. And then quick note on testing, I mentioned this in my skating Q&A video as well. My biggest advice is don't test until you feel like you're ready. Until you feel like I'm gonna go on the ice today and pass that test in flying colors, I would not recommend testing because testing is quite expensive and also time consuming. Every time you test, that's another $80 down the drain. So if you essentially fail, you have to do it again, which is another $80. It's not like you're just pay a $80 one-time fee. Like if you screwed up, pay another $80. So that's what I would caution you. And lastly, on a note for competition, just because you're not a competitive skater doesn't mean you're any less of a skater. If you just want to try figure skating because you just think it's really cool, it's really awesome, you just really want to do something that will help support getting more movement into your day-to-day life, skating just makes you a happier person, definitely do skate. You do not have to be a competitive figure skater to have figure skating be a meaningful part of your life. You don't need to compete if you don't want to, and if you feel like this is not a financial decision that I can make now, but maybe in the future. If you do want to pursue this competitively, do seek out local competitions first, because typically the registration fees for them are a lot cheaper, and also look out for smaller competitions that your local club may host from time to time, because oftentimes they might be cheaper than some of the bigger competitions out there. I do recommend that if you go compete, definitely try to go with friends. You can split a hotel room. Simple concept of economy of scales. Lastly, if you just want to get experience performing in front of a live audience, simulating a competition, but you're not quite ready for it or want to invest the money in competitions, I would recommend keeping an eye out for local exhibitions or shows that welcome skaters on all levels, just to get practice, you know, putting together a routine and performing it in front of other people. My very first live performance was about 6 months into my skating journey when I was in college. Literally, one of my good friends was someone who just choreographed a program for me. I bought a $100 dress from eBay and I just performed at a show that our school was hosting, and that was the very first time that I performed live. If you want to get practice performing, it doesn't necessarily have to be at a competition. Alright, time to summarize. So my recurring weekly expenses total up to around $415. 48% of that goes to ice time, 40% of that goes to coaching, 10% of that goes to off-ice training, and 2% of that goes to skate sharpening. And now let's look at our annual expenses. My total annual expenditure is around $5,215. 35% of that is my costume, because this year I did decide to splurge. Typically that number is never as high as 35% of my total annual spend. 29% goes towards my competition travel fees. 23% of that goes to choreography. 12% of that goes to competition entry fees, and 2% goes towards the memberships. And lastly, for the initial investments category, I was trying to think about how I wanted to present you guys this number in an annualized way. I just thought I would do a simple depreciation over the lifespan of boots and blades. Skates can last up to around 5 years, and blades definitely last a lot more. It can be up to 10 years. If I were to just divide the initial investment by the number of years that they last, so on average yearly I spend $210 on equipment. 67% of that goes towards the boot, and 33% of that goes towards the blades. And last but not least, this is just general budgeting advice. In order to pursue something in your life, you do have to make investment, and sacrifices are also part of it. It's really your personal decision to figure out in your life, what are the things I want to invest my time and money in, and what are the things that are less important to me. Because for me, figure skating is such a big and important part of my life, I cut spending in a lot of the other areas. I almost never take rideshare everywhere I go, or taxis. It's always the subway or I walk. Secondly, I also don't eat out as much as the typical 25-year-old in New York City that works a regular corporate job. There are times where that conflicts with being able to see friends, but I found ways to circumvent that and still be able to have a regular and healthy social life. Not every time you see a friend has to be a $50 or $100 dinner. Sometimes seeing a friend may just be, hey, let's get dessert or coffee, which is substantially cheaper. It could also be, hey, the weather's nice outside, why don't we take a walk for free? There are a lot of adjustments and sacrifices that I do make in order to make this work, because this is a substantial chunk of my income being spent. And last but not least, you have to learn to say no to certain things. For me, I also don't go out a lot unless it's a special occasion and it's like a good friend's birthday. I'm more than happy to be there. Other than that, I don't drink, I don't go out, because that is another big source of just money suck. At the end of the day, we as human beings, we have a lot of things that we like and would want and have in our life. So do know that if you want to put your heart and soul into investing towards a personal goal, you do have to make some sacrifices and have a plan forward to pursue that goal. I know you're probably like, Kathy, this is so overwhelming. There's so many numbers, so many categories that I have to be thinking about. I know these overwhelming feelings all too well, which is why I want to help make your life easier by creating my automated figure skating budget tracker, which once again, you can download it in the description down below for free. $0. Hopefully that provides a really realistic and honest view on what the finances look like behind being a figure skater. And hopefully this helps you have a better plan if you want to start figure skating yourself as well. If you find this video remotely helpful at all, please hit that subscribe button down below, give this video a like, and leave me a comment down below on what you would like to see from me next, because your next idea may just be the next video that I make. Alright, till next time, bye guys. I promise the numbers will add up faster than... There's forever ambulance noises and weird knocking noises from neighbors above. Competitive figure skater to have...
Boy, your honey sickly sweet keeps me coming, got me